The building that you see behind me used to be a railroad depot station. Passengers would arrive and depart in this building. Now it houses the home of the Cottle County County Heritage Museum. This is the main entrance. Let's go take a look and see what's inside. This is the view from the main door and the main entrance. As we go over to the right, there's an area here which is dedicated to various aspects of early days of Paducah and the county. Here on this wall there's information about some of the early theaters, and just looking at it right offhand, it looked like there were probably at least 4 theaters that were in Paducah. I don't know if that was all simultaneously, but for a town this size, it's quite amazing that there would be that many theaters. Of course, they were established before the days of television as well. In this corner, we have a little bit of artifacts. Then moving in this direction, it's not quite so organized. This organ was donated by the First Baptist Church of Paducah. A little bit of church history there. And then moving along, there are some artifacts from a early meat market and a dry goods store dating back to 1905. And then moving over, there is a section totally dedicated to military history of Cottle County. Now we have military uniforms, photographs, some military equipment. And this display case here is sort of an interesting story. I was told that these papers, medals, bullet shells, flag and all had all been donated to the museum some years ago, but were completely forgotten about, actually hidden behind another display. And they were recently discovered and finally put on display for the public to see. Over in this corner is a tribute to an early physician, and well, probably several physicians, and there are some artifacts connected to those medical practices. Old pill bottles. And it looks like here is some documentation on early births. Old-fashioned wheelchair. Dr. Shingle. Next section is dedicated to schools in Cottle County. A number of artifacts. And I was told that a number of these displays were actually put together by students themselves for some school history projects, such as information on some of the schools that were in the county and some of the administrators, teachers. This was put together as a school project, and this was put together as a school project by students, junior high, high school students. Another display done as a student history project. This is interesting, the school mascot, the dragons. And this little placard here indicates that Floyd Inman, a student, was actually responsible for coming up with the dragon's name, or mascots. Equipment used in the schools, an old wood stove. It was used in one of the schools. Some old school yearbooks, artwork, diplomas, number of things associated with the schools of Cottle County. Over in this far corner is all dedicated to a man who served for 25 years in the Texas House of Representatives. Includes his desk at the state capitol. He was an attorney. There are a number of documents relating to his education. A number of awards that were given to him for his 25 years of service. His dedication to the people. A county ballot box. And also his official chair. And then we'll move into this area where there are some old typewriters and audio visual equipment. And we move around to this area, and here are some artifacts by a local artist who actually worked in gypsum rock that is mined in Cottle County. And then if I can slide this, well, maybe I can't slide that panel across. But in the interview that you may have seen on the Story Channel with Vera Hand, she talked about her grandfather who became an early resident of Cottle County, Mr. Frederick Lidke. This is a photograph of he and his wife, and there's a razor that belonged to him, and then two ledgers that he worked with. He was somewhat of a bookkeeper in the beginning. There is an accounting book, it looks like inside. The actual business name is not mentioned, but in looking at the ledger and the types of items that were sold, looks like it might have been some sort of mercantile or general store. And then down in the bottom is ledgers of property that was bought and sold in the Paducah. And of course he was the county abstract officer. And for those of you who saw my post on Facebook, I did mention that he had served in the Civil War. Since then I found out that he served for the Union Army, and that the family had some documents that had come from most likely his military service that had a connection to Abraham Lincoln, possibly containing his signature. Well, I have found out that the museum knows nothing about those documents. More than likely, in most cases, as in most cases, when families donate articles to their local county museum, they pretty much donate materials which the family doesn't really care to keep for themselves. More valuable things, more interesting things, many times the family will keep those for themselves. So those documents are actually not available. Over here we have some fossils that have been discovered in the county. This is it appears to be a mastodon tusk. This was actually discovered when a farmer was plowing his field. I was told that. Don't have definitive information on some of these other items on display here. And moving over in this direction, we have a safe that belonged to a company that was in the business of loaning money, much like a bank, but it was more of a landowner's co-op. I asked if the safe had ever been broken into or involved in a robbery, and well, there's no knowledge of that. Some artifacts from local drugstore, mercantile store, cabinet containing lots of thread, And we move into this little hallway, and everything displayed on this wall, except for the cowboy hats there, are related to the original Marlboro Man. I won't disturb the people that are in there right now. Here's another exhibit that have been put together by school children here in Paducah, Cottle County. A little bit of the history of the FAA or FFA and 4-H programs. Then we have some materials that are related to some of the ranches in the county. Brands, one thing and another. And over on the other side, more photographs. There are description cards on most of these items, give you some idea of the connection of these items. There's a transit level used by the city of Paducah. And then as we move around the corner, we see some items that would have been in homes or had been in homes in the county. Pretty cool looking old radio there. It's like a wooden hearth. Go over a fireplace perhaps. A sofa. Looks like it might also be a hide-a-bed. And then upstairs there is a display of the furniture that may have been used in an early home on the turn of the century, beginning of the century. Rodeo History. More artifacts from farming, ranching, yokes that would have been used by teams of horses to pull farm implements or buggies. Two very interesting side saddles. This one is said to have come from Tennessee. And then this side saddle was produced by a local saddle maker. There are a number of items in the museum which might be of particular interest to women. Take a look at, for instance, at this hand-cranked miniature sewing machine. Let me stick my hand down there so you can see how small that is. That must have been done for some, or that must have been used for some very small items, I would think. Here is a sewing machine which indicates that it was purchased in 1914 for his wife. This required no electricity or feet motion supplied the power. You may have actually seen one of those in operation. Now this placard is a little bit confusing. It talks about in 1851 the Singer Sewing Machine Company by Isaac Merritt Singer. Don't know if that is the actual production date of this machine or when the company was established. Right next door, I don't know if this is considered to be an antique or not, but it is an example of a digital software controlled sewing machine. You stick a CD in there, I would presume, or upload information into the machine. It's relatively modern. Here is some costume jewelry, a sewing basket containing some items that a woman might use for her sewing needs. Over here is what is explained on the tag as Celluloid Dresser Set, and this dates back to the 1920s. Celluloid predated today's modern plastics. And we have a hand mirror, probably some celluloid boxes back there to hold small items. Now this is real interesting. These are different examples of curling irons, and it appears that these curling irons would actually be stuck on a stove or put onto a stove for heating up, and then while it was still hot you would pick it up and then apply to your hair. Looks like this would form a double wave, pretty tight wave there, all over, of course, requiring no electricity. Then back here we have a curling iron. Don't know exactly how that would work. It dates back to the 1920s, and it did operate on electricity. You can see the frayed power cord coming out the back of it there. We took a look at those curling irons where you sit on the stove, one thing or another. Those are items that you might be used at home. These are some implements that would have been used by a beauty salon or beauty shop to give ladies a permanent. Not sure whether this machine and the related items are related to this behemoth back here. It's kind of hard to see exactly what it's all about. Looks like these are clips. These are electrical wires, which leads to a large dome type object. The whole thing is about 6 feet tall, just under 6 feet tall. Now imagine going through all of the time and effort to get your hair all wrapped up in around these metal appliances here, then clipped into these clips in the right position, and then the salon operator says, "Okay, let me get you plugged in." Are you glad you're a little bit better off today? That's one thing we can really enjoy about modern life. At first I thought that wooden large box in the back was a wardrobe. Back in the day, houses weren't built with built-in closets. Had no closets at all, but wardrobes instead protected people's clothes from moths, dust, that type of thing. That's what I thought this was. But in actual fact, taking a little bit closer look, it turns out to be a hide-a-bed. Many houses didn't have a whole lot of room, very tiny, in order to open up more space for just living during the day. They could nestle the bed up against the wall and then pull it out at night as needed. For you ladies that enjoy knitting with yarn, imagine having to make your own yarn. This is a yarn wheel used to create yarns from loose fibers. But that would take quite a bit of time. Here are some artifacts that are related to trapping, sawing wood, handling meat, weighing, measuring. Looks like this is an industrial sized pressure cooker. I understand that many times there were community canning events where ladies would bring in the products that they would want to can, and rather than doing it individually, they all got together and did it as a group, I'd use a large pressure cooker to heat up the canned goods and seal them. Washboards, early form of hand washing clothing. You don't see that happening much anymore. This is a cream separator, separating the cream from the milk. And then here is an interesting washing machine that if you look down below, there is actually a motor down here, not an electrical motor. We can get the lighting just right. You can see some fins on piston cylinder there. So this was more than likely a gasoline powered motor, and that would fire up that washer. Let's take a little closer look at what is on top of this washing machine here. This is actually homemade lye soap. In many cases, you could just run down to the local grocery store, or actually it would be a mercantile store, to pick up soap. However, there were some commercial versions of soap that would be available. This is a naphtha soap. Don't know how well that would go over in today's consumer market. And then there's Crystal Light laundry soap. There's an early steam iron, along with these flat irons. Give you a little bit closer look at some of these rub boards, some of them using metal. Most of them just use plain wood, something to rub your clothes, socks, underwear, whatever on. Give them a good scrubbing. Rub boards. Flat irons that would be heated up on the stove. And iron the clothing. We have a display of attire which would have been worn by women back in the day. Not everyday attire, most of this is pretty fancy. We have cooking utensils, and then furniture items that would have been used in early. These days, one is in vogue if one purchases coffee beans and you grind your own coffee. Well, here is a coffee grinder, and once again it is hand operated, no electricity required. And next door is a toaster. At first I thought this was a toaster that one would set on a stove, perhaps a cast iron stove, but then I got to noticing around over on the side that there are actually some protrusions there which indicate that this is in fact an electric toaster. Want sausage? Make your own. These are sausage grinders. They're actually sitting upside down. You would put the meat in here. You would attach the grinder to a table or a cabinet, and then crank it down so it would stay in place, and then use the hand crank to make the sausage, which would then come through the cutting wheels here. This is an ice box, a true ice box, because you would set a large block of ice in here, and it would keep all of your items that need refrigeration cold enough where they did not spoil quite so readily. And then we have a very fancy wood-burning stove. At first I didn't think this was a wood-burning stove, but it in fact is. It does have a firebox down below here, which I can't really open. I've got one hand that is not free. We have a waffle iron that one would set on top of a stove such as this. And that is indeed a fancy wood cooking stove. This machine also does not require any electricity. Many things were done by hand. And this happens to be a can sealer. So when tin cans were used that need to be sealed up somehow or another, that would help seal it up. There's a pressure cooker in the background there. And then right down here we have another waffle iron machine. This has got somewhat of a wide base on it. I don't know if that would be set directly on an open flame fire, or perhaps it's got the year 1910 on it. So not sure exactly why it would have that wide base on it. Probably to capture more heat off of an open flame or a burner of some type on the stove. Now imagine having to make your own butter. There's a butter churn. And then back here is essentially an indoor clothesline. These poles on here can be deployed so that you can hang your items over and stand out something like the branches on a tree and dry them out indoors when you cannot do it outdoors. Kitchens. Once again, nothing requiring electricity in this corner. Early dining table. Okay, and as we make our way back down the stairs here, there is one exhibit room I have not covered yet. These exhibits consist of some early calculating machines which have been used at a bank or an accountant. Most of them hand operated. Artwork done by some local artists. Some early dental equipment and chair. Items depicting some of the early residents and their families. And then we have something here which is related to how Cottle County became organized to begin with. This involves a shooting of a man, and the man accused of murdering him. He was arrested for murder. He was put on trial. He did not think that he would be able to get justice in a county outside of where he lived. Cottle County was not an organized county. And so he petitioned some of his neighbors to gather together and draw up a formal petition to get the county organized. And then this is more information which has been put together by some school children here in town, which are copies of some of the actual court records from that period of time. Sheriff, constable documents, subpoenas. These are all related to this particular trial and the proceedings. Great, wonderful documentation. Great stories to read in there from original documents. Actually, these are not original documents. They are copies which are laminated so that you can handle them. And if you're interested in doing more research on how trials were conducted, there is documents from the prosecutors and the defense attorney in that particular murder trial. Incidentally, in the long run, the man who is accused of the murder, Mr. J.J. Adams, was found not guilty by his peers. We have some portraits of some early citizens. Photographs. Artifacts from early community organizations. And that just about does it. Plenty of things to see, learn about, talk about, all inside this old railroad depot.